The smartest countries in the world don't need a perfect plan. They need a stable compass. And right now, the world is being reorganized around one brutal reality. Reliability is collapsing. Reliability. So everyone is hedging. Trade first, security second, maybe defense second, and the narrative last. That's the global environment right now. Welcome to Fourth Proposed English. Now look at the Pakistan's posture in that environment. We are behaving like a state that is trying to become relevant by attaching itself to one volatile personality, aka Trump, Donald Trump. And that problem is not the personalities exist in politics. The problem is when a fragile country like ours, Pakistan, starts confusing personalities such as Trump with a doctrine. Because when you tie your external lane to a man like Trump, you don't gain leverage. You lose room. You become a prop. You become available. You become the place where others think they can extract concessions. Because your policy isn't anchored in institutions. It's anchored in one person's mood swings in Pakistan, obviously. And while we are busy selling ourselves a fantasy that this peace board optics, Gaza board, this lane will keep us updated in the changing world, the real world is moving without us and without America. EU is repositioning. India is being absorbed with the bigger trade security conversations, the mother of all deals. China is sending signals that it can manage coexistence where it suits its interest, just like it told India that dragons and elephants can dance together. And the entire map is being redrawn from Middle East to Europe by the people who don't wait for press conference to decide strategy, such as Trump. So the international story isn't who won the week. The international story is the world is building new lanes and Pakistan is stuck trying to impress a temporary guest because we all know Donald Trump is going to get impeached. Now here's where it gets serious and where most people miss the connection. External alignment always produces internal behavior. The moment you lock yourself into a risky international posture, you start needing more control at home because dissent becomes unhelpful, unpredictability becomes dangerous, and communication, especially with leaders like Imran Khan, becomes the enemy. And this is exactly what you were watching inside Pakistan. And now it's shifting. The power is shaking. And the first symptom of the shaking power is always the same: panic about the communication. And communication in this context is Imran Khan. That's why this week wasn't just news. This week was a system trying to keep its temperature down while the room is catching fire. And this is where Imran Khan's health becomes the trigger, not just a detail. And who leaked the news? You can go and research on it yourself on it. See, let me put it bluntly. Health is the one category that breaks the script. I agree with that. You can manage politics with the propaganda, not health concerns. You can manage cases with the courts. You can manage opposition with bans and blackouts. But the health crisis doesn't behave like politics. It widens the audience. It changes the moral frame. It forces the questions that cannot be answered with national interest slogans. Hence, this sudden change and the sudden calls for meetings is important. That's why you saw the exact pattern. First, blackout, then leaks, then confusion about the sources, then selective denial by the government, then partial confirmation from the government. And then suddenly the same media ecosystem that usually speaks in the safe tones starts shifting language, asking for access to Khan, asking for proper doctors to Khan, asking for the family meetings. And when the communication begins, so health could be the trigger. See, people treat this as empathy. I treat it as a risk detection. Because if something goes wrong under a blackout, the system inherits a liability it cannot control with a theater. And that's why the system, despite its ego, starts sliding towards a controlled retreat. So yes, communications are beginning again. Meetings are being forced back onto the table. Not because the system wanted to, because the system has realized it cannot freeze politics forever without creating a bigger explosion. But is the system ready for sacrifice? The sacrifice that the Khan will demand? We shall see that. And here's the part that matters. The fear was never just a meeting. The fear is what meetings will produce. Momentum, alignment, coordination, and a public that stops reacting individually and starts moving collectively. A weak system hates collective movement. A weak system only survives when everyone stays fragmented, confused, distracted, exhausted, isolated. Now layer the second internal dynamic, the important dynamic, the question of power centralization inside the establishment, especially after the constitutional tweaking phase, this 27th Amendment era, after which there is no 4-star general ranks in Pakistan Army. It's completely gone. Whether someone likes that level or not, core argument is behavioral. And it's hard to ignore. The structure has been compromised. Not compromised, compressed. The old buffer layers are thinner or maybe missing. The chain doesn't feel like a normal pyramid. It feels like everything is being squeezed upward. Like you have lower operational tier and then top heavy center. The system operates like it's the 3-star, 5-star. A direct squeeze with the fewer shock absorbers. What does that do to a state? It can make the center look extremely strong for a while, but it also makes the system brittle because it's personal. And the brittle system don't break when giant hammer hits them. They break when small shocks keep hitting a structure that has no cushion to survive. That's why the system looks confused right now. Not because they don't understand politics, because the structure is reacting without the shock absorbers. Decisions become too centralized, too personal, too direct. So consistency dies. And when the consistency dies, you compensate with the only tool. That's narrative control. Which brings us back again, why the communication become the enemy in the first place. If your structure is centralized and brittle, then the communication outside the center feels like a sabotage because it introduces variables you cannot tightly manage. And that's why they fear a political figure's contact more than they fear economic collapse. That's why they fear messages more than they fear deficit, because a deficit can be patched with loans and numbers. A message can change alignment. Now return to the international land, because this is where the trap tightens. If the external environment escalates, especially around Iran, Pakistan doesn't get to watch from the distance. Spillover is geography, refugees, border heat, internal polarization, and security environment that becomes a perfect excuse for the most dangerous internal instinct of all, unconstitutional or maybe called exceptional measures. And you can already see how certain minds would read that equation. External threat, internal dissent plus centralization equals justification for the coup. This is why I keep calling this country hostile short-termism. Because when you combine an externally dependent posture with the internally centralized brittle power structure, you don't create stability. You create a machine that needs constant suppression to feel stable. And the moment suppression slips, the backlash is violent. Now, do I think the system can keep suppressing indefinitely? No, because pressure is rising from multiple directions at once right now. The Western belt is already overheated. Look at what happened in Balochistan today. 12 places were attacked at once. It was coordinated attack. Balochistan is burning, and that's not good, especially with Iran problem, especially with EU aligning with the India. Where are the BLAs and BRAs or whatever's heads? They are all in Europe. And on top of it, on the same belt where we have problems with Afghanistan, again with Indian support, we are mishandling KPK. Just like this episode of Tira. You don't weaken a ruling party with steps like this. You strengthen resentment against the state. And resentment against the state is a completely different animal. It doesn't need a leader to grow. It grows on humiliation, denial, and being used as a pawn. And while that's happening, you also have a protest temperature rising into the February. Movements, parallel calls, the broader sense that clampdown lane has hit its ceiling. The system can delay meetings, block messages, tighten media, and still end up forced into communication because reality pushes harder than ego. So what does this week actually mean? It signals the beginning of controlled unwind, whether they admit it or not. Health resurfacing made it harder to maintain blackout. That forced the system toward controlled access. Controlled access opens the doors for communication. Communication opens the door for political reconfiguration. And political reconfiguration is exactly what a brittle centralized setup fears, because it cannot predict where the new equilibrium will land. And the structural question is the only one that matters right now. Are we running a state anchored in institutions adaptable to the global realignment, or are we running a personal power project that needs international patronage and domestic suppression to survive? Because if it's the second one, then every week will look like this. Reactive, inconsistent, nervous about the communication, desperate about the distractions, and increasingly dangerous on the Western belt, including KPK and Balochistan. So yes, internationally, we are misreading the world. Nationally, power is shaking. Internally, the system is being forced reluctantly towards communication again. And underneath that is the deeper risk. A centralized, brittle structure with the fewer buffers can look very invincible, right up until the moment it isn't. And that's why this moment matters, not because it's dramatic, because it's structural. And once the structural shift starts, they don't care about anyone's ego.